To the evolving situation at an ostrich farm in Edgewood.
What do you want?
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a great interview for you, and I want to get to that as soon as possible. But I hope you're having a good week so far. There's so much happening in the news, and we'll be back moments from now.
The Prime Minister lied, and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Thank you for all of you who did subscribe yesterday. I think somebody probably resubscribed. Much appreciated. The response to yesterday's show was phenomenal. Haven't seen a response like that in, well, a few weeks anyway. And it was great. So today, I hope this is a great follow-up. Probably even better. We've got Katie Pasitney on the show. I recorded this late yesterday after a very long day for both of us. And so I think you're going to find this absolutely fascinating. I've got some video clips to show you as well from the farm, from Dacey News after we listened to Katie. And I've got to say, this is incredible news. I'm just going to show you again. You know, because some people are saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" Yeah, I'm sure. You know, and this isn't even on their website. I've never heard hitherto of the Canada Agricultural Review Tribunal. I had no idea this government body existed, but it does. And this is their decision. And it's not even available on their website yet. I wrote an article this morning for Blaze Media, was going to have a link in the story to their website with this, as they call it, the cart. Wasn't up yet, but thankfully, Katie sent me this on Sunday when they were able to talk about it. And this is the decision that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency was completely improper in the way it communicated. It was supposed to communicate in person. It chose to violate that necessity, that mandate, and it talked to people. Well, that's even the wrong word. Communicated via email and would not talk to Katie or her mom. So that's and of course the question, and Katie addresses this in the interview. What does that mean? This opens up a window of opportunity as large and as broad as the horizon at the Edgewood, BC farm, which, of course, if you could see the horizon, it's a beautiful landscape of the Rocky Mountains in the background, and there's lots of opportunity there. So Katie gets into this in the interview. It's absolutely the moment, as I think I said yesterday, pregnant with possibilities. So let's get to the interview. I've got more to say after we run this, but enjoy. And welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. And we do have some great news. We talked about it yesterday, and we've been talking about it for the last 48 hours, actually. But this is monumental. And with me, of course, is Katie Pasitney, spokeswoman for Universal Ostrich Farm. So, Katie, this is incredible news. And it's not just the fact that you're not being forced to pay a $10,000 fine. The fine has been dropped, but I find this extremely interesting, and I just want to share the news release here. So let me ask you this to start. Were you expecting a decision from this tribunal so quickly, or did you expect that they would side with you on this?
Absolutely. After the last track record, no, we didn't think that they would side with us. We were definitely always hoping that they would look at the facts and everything that we submitted and take it seriously. We weren't expecting a decision on this tribunal till June, actually. So this actually caught us off guard. But it was a delight to be able to read that email. I heard the news from my mom. We read it together and we both started crying because it was just nice to hear from somebody on the federal level that they validated our concerns. And our concerns were that we were not served properly in the beginning. And you know, this opened up a lot of other questions. And I think that Canadians are going to have to ask now. And those questions are, number one, were we ever really under a lawful quarantine? You know, those safeguards are put in place by Parliament for a very important reason, because quarantines carry such an excessive consequence for people with their livelihoods and their animals and their properties. So as well as it opens up to other questions, you know, even regarding the shooting, I think one could ask if the procedural process wasn't followed properly in the beginning to serve us the quarantine papers, then how was a proper procedure possibly followed through to ensure that that shooting conducted at our farm, which was about less than 300 meters from an open highway? Did they follow those procedures okay? So it opens up a lot of other questions for not just Canadians, but I hope on a government level as well, because these are serious concerns that would directly affect not just us as a farm, but many other farmers out there.
Well, I just want to look at the news release for a minute, because in case people don't get it, what's going on here, I think it's important to emphasize. And of course, so, okay, I think the key thing here is that in its decision, the Canadian Agricultural Review Tribunal, which I have to confess, I had no idea existed, ruled that subsection 94.1, paragraph 1 of the Health of Animals Regulation requires quarantine notices to be personally delivered, meaning physically handed to the affected party. The tribunal determined that the agency's reliance on email service, despite subsequent communications, did not meet this mandatory statutory requirement. As a result, the notice of violation and the accompanying $10,000 penalty were set aside. The tribunal emphasized that its decision does not turn on the seriousness of avian influenza, nor does it undermine the importance of disease control. Rather, the ruling clarifies that when Parliament has imposed strict procedural safeguards, those safeguards must be respected, particularly where regulatory actions can carry significant consequences for the farmers, animals, and livelihood. And I'll just read the four key findings. The tribunal confirmed that personal delivery under subsection 94.4-1 requires physical in-person delivery, not electronic transmission. The requirement is mandatory, not discretionary, emphasis yours. The agency did not demonstrate that exceptional circumstances, waiver, or impossibility justified departing from this requirement, and improper service cannot be cured retroactively. And that is incredible.
It's a really big one for our family and our farm and other Canadians and people across the world to hear that once the damage is done, you cannot fix it. So as you said in their list that those safeguards are in place for a reason, they tried to fight that we waived our statutory rights by responding by email. So that gave us that we acknowledged the quarantine order and or by lawyer interaction, and that was not found justifiable by the tribunal. So the tribunal found that those safeguards, again, are in place because once they hand you and they actually are there to go over your quarantine documents with you, that process is in place to protect us so that they're assessing the risk of the, whatever viral threat there may be. They're actually communicating with you and going over the quarantine documents with you so that they can acknowledge your understanding of them, and that they're also speaking to you about your willingness to comply. Now, this would go in hand with their obscure demands that they were putting on us for quarantine demands, like netting our whole farm. Well, if they were there and personally hand serving us and going through those quarantine documents, they would know that that was outlandish and impossible. It didn't make any sense, and it would not have solved any of the problems. They were asking us to separate the males from the females. It was not going to solve the problem. But if we would have had that one-on-one personal communication, like is expected by Parliament and the federal government from an agency that wields so much power, we would have probably, we may have mitigated some of these huge obstacles that we had gone through for this last year.
I don't know how many times you raised the issue during the time in which the CFIA occupied your farm, that they were completely uncommunicative.
Absolutely.
And it was impossible to relay messages to them. You said you had to literally send emails to the Ottawa office, and the Ottawa office might comply by communicating with the people on the ground, maybe not. And the attitude from day one with the CFIA agents was one of just incredible arrogance. And it's almost like they didn't think they had to comply with any of these rules and regulations.
Well, I think it's really important, again, for Canadian farmers to be more aware now than ever, because this raises the questions for other farmers. How many other farmers were improperly served? And that resulted in unlawful enforcement to their farms. So, I put that question out to many Canadian farmers. If you find that you may have been improperly served, and that means by email only and not hand delivered your quarantine documents, I think it's time that we band together and we come together and stand up for our rights as Canadians, and especially as in our agricultural sector that we're seeing being hit so hard right now. We have the timing, I think, is really important too, that we have farmers across Canada are raising concerns of these new livestock traceability regulations that are coming out. And we need to stand united and use our voices now more than ever to fight for that accountability and transparency and clarity in what this is going to mean. Because if they can, just set aside parts of the law like this and take shortcuts, what does that mean for farmers going forward in the future? And there was many parts of this tribunal that really just brought a very, very long-awaited a highlight to some very dark moments. But we can't go backwards. The damage is done, but the question is very, very big. And I think we have to have that answered. And right now I'm going to ask for communication from Heath McDonald and Marjorie Michael. You've been very quiet up to now, and I am requesting my mom, Karen Esperson, and myself for Universal Ostrich Farms. We're asking for your input and response to this tribunal. We would like a public response to this tribunal, and what does this mean for Canadians? Somebody had to sign off on all that money that was spent on our farm. And we know that was 7 million. We know that's way higher than that. So I would like to know if we can, it's been acknowledged and found that Canadian Food Inspection Agency is guilty for not serving us those quarantine documents properly. What other things were possibly overlooked?
Well, when I was discussing this on my program this morning, I said, this is a moment that's pregnant with possibilities. And of course, you've already said questions need to be asked.
That's right.
About whether or not this makes the whole process illegal. Because as we know, in a criminal court, if the police do not comply with the regulations involving arrest or charging an individual, judges will throw out the entire case because it was not done properly.
Right.
Now, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm sure you're getting good legal advice, but perhaps this could be somewhat applicable as well.
Well, and that's again, just questions are back to the Canadians to ask the hard questions. What does this mean going forward if we have such big agencies that wield so much power and are destroying livelihoods and killing all of our animals? If they can make these procedural errors and take the shortcuts because they don't think that they have to, what does that mean going, for everything else? One of the things that they use as
I'm just going to add here that I am in no way putting any words in Katie's mouth, but she has stated quite clearly that they need to ask these questions because clearly there is more to this than just the removal of a fine.
As excuse to that they couldn't service those papers was weather conditions. Well, the tribunal judge said that's not applicable. No, the weather conditions were fine. You were there multiple times. You had the chance to serve them personally, but you did not. They used our protesters as an excuse. That was dismissed. They used RCMP as an excuse, and that was dismissed because the judge said, well, you had no problem finding RCMP to kill the animals. You're telling me you had a hard time finding RCMP to help serve the documents that were, supposed to be part of the procedure. So again, my mom and I were just very elated to see that these things were highlighted and outlined because this is an opportunity and a very important opportunity for Canadians and our agricultural sector to reflect on how procedural safeguards are here to support and they're here to protect effective and humane disease response in Canada and going forward.
Well, it's interesting. Just last week, we were doing a panel discussion, and you were advocating that Agriculture and Agri-Food Minister Heath MacDonald stepped down.
Yeah.
Because he was overseeing this incredibly horrific operation.
That's right.
And I just find it fascinating that a government body, this is not like this is a government body, it belongs to the federal government. And they responded not only so quickly, but they're in your corner on this.
Yeah.
And after I think you made the rather, I would say, courageous position that the minister needs to think about his job over this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet that didn't seem to compromise any of this process because they not only gave you a speedy reply, they gave you one that you were perhaps not anticipating at all, but they gave you a positive one. So maybe it does work if you stand up for principle, if you fight, if you demand your rights. Maybe somebody is listening in the federal government because every day I'm putting my hands up and saying, is anybody in the federal government listening to average Canadians anymore? Apparently one body is. So I think we have to take some optimism from this.
Very reassuring. I've said from the beginning, and I always say it, God wrote the story. God knows the ending. All we have to do is have faith. So the ostriches became a martyr, and their horrific ending to their life, I still believe, will come with great change. And my mom does as well. This is something we hold on to. That is very important to us. That trauma and the theatrical display of punishment for defending everything that we've loved and worked for and believed in was ended by procedural. It may have ended when it all started with procedural error.
Yes, and I'm just going through 12 pages of this report from the tribunal, which I've read through, and I just find it very thorough, very comprehensive, and very adamant that this process had to be respected and wasn't. So I think it's absolutely fascinating. But you said last week, and I pointed this out a couple of times today to people I've talked to on the air and off. You said 2026 is the year of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, I think you were very perhaps prophetic or prescient by making this comment, because clearly there is a demand for accountability here.
There is
a government body.
Oh, there's a demand for accountability across Canada right now. And it's not, we're seeing that roll out in not just our agricultural sector, but we're looking at what the RCMP. I mean, the new findings in the RCMP, the 400 officers in Toronto. We're looking at Canadian Food Inspection Agency steamrolling farmers. The timing is right where Canadian farmers are very nervous about this new livestock traceability. The timing is right. And I think we're seeing Canadians all ask for accountability, transparency, and clarity on where we're going in the future, because we have to protect our families, our future, food security, our generational farmers, and our protection. How are we supposed to feel safe if we can misuse our enforcement like we did at our farm? That did not make a lot of Canadians feel safer. It put a lot of eroded trust and a lot more questions in Canadians' heads, I think.
I'm wondering if you're thinking about the poetic justice in this as well as the real justice. But as we've discussed many times, you are heading up a federation to help farmers, to stop the war in agriculture, to fight for justice for farmers across the country. Does this decision not impact that? Because as you pointed out, what about the CFIA's action at all those other farms that they invaded and occupied, and they massacred hundreds, thousands, all of the chickens that have been destroyed, all of the pigs, all of the cows the CFIA has destroyed across this country in these massacres? Were they exercising, I wonder, the same degree of irresponsibility at a lot of these locations? This could have profound ramifications and consequences for this organization.
Yeah, it brings me to another story that I had heard that was in Alberta. I believe a gentleman that was standing up when they did a town hall.
Now, I'm going to get to that story in a minute, because I know a lot of you are getting very enthused about what we're doing here. And believe me, I know you had I'm wearing the ostrich hoodie today. And thank you for so many of you for buying that ostrich hoodie. But we've got some other items I think you're going to be very interested in. We're about halfway through the interview, and the best, I think, is yet to come. This is a great, great interview. But just want to share this with you because I'm excited. I'm excited about this. This is our trigger sticker. You can have it. It can be yours. And look at, here we go. This is like the Ostrich Farm package. And by the way, we had a huge response to these designs initially, and all of the proceeds went to Katie and her mom. This is the Justice for Universal Ostrich sticker, and this, hey, RCMP, CFI, the world saw you. Well, apparently so did the tribunal. What goes around comes around. So I would encourage you to have a look at the store today. And if you're enthused about what's happening here, if you're enthused about the potential for accountability, somebody asked me in the comments section right off the bat, will there be accountability? Yes, if we follow up on this and continue to press for accountability. And if Katie continues to press for accountability. Anyway, back to the interview here.
The story that I heard was, there's this big cowboy wearing his cowboy hat, big belt buckle. And this was the gentleman who was made to kill his almost 500 deer. Now, he didn't just have to kill his 500 deer, he had to decapitate his 500 deer. Oh. And he had to send in the heads for testing. How satanic and sadistic is that? At a level of, if you do not have a capacity to have empathy of a farmer and our connection to our animals, it doesn't matter if these animals are being used for food, or if these animals were for science and research or innovation, or if these animals are your backyard livestock that you collect eggs from. We have a connection with these animals. And if this agency can bypass procedural law, they're bypassing the humanity, the human aspect in having empathy. So when this gentleman did this process, every one of his deer came back negative. Where are the consequences for these actions of such a bold, big agency that wields so much power. They just continue on and they don't look back, like they didn't look back at our farm. Our field is still full of blood-ridden straw bales that were used to build a kill pen, $200,000 worth of your taxpayer dollars money, with bloody shell casings. And they walked away. And they continued on. So I just don't think that they've possibly had enough pushback. And this time they didn't know that they would have a family that would go 404 days fighting without a day off to make sure that this never happens again, or at least
coming in and out of here.
We put the proper safeguards in place that are going to be held.
Yeah, I just want to play a minute or so of this footage. Chris Dacey, my good friend, who is very, very, very involved in the reporting, and he has been at the farm recently, and they've put out this video of just how incredibly horrific the scene still looks. And so I understand you're not going to get the quarantine lifted before spring, or it's very unlikely it's going to happen. So you're still dealing with this shit pit. And that's a lot. I've described it that way many times. I can't think of a better description. This is what these people left you with. And I can't help but thinking that there is some overriding justice going on here, because if they really thought they could get away with this and walk away from it, and without any accountability, we get back to that word time and time again. But if we look at what Chris documented here, I think it's just absolutely incredible. This was allowed to happen in the first place. But the fact that finally somebody's saying, this should not have happened at all. And I think it's good news.
It is. And let's talk about, sorry, those pictures are hard to see.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Sorry. Okay. Let's talk about how, migratory fowl. And if this was really about a virus, how were they allowed to leave our field that way when they're supposed to be the professionals? How are those blood-ridden bales laid and spread all over our field? We had to stop them from spreading those bales. I just want to point that out. They were taking that blood-ridden hay and they were spreading it across my aunt and uncle's property. And that was documented on a live where everybody was screaming for them to stop, because as if my aunt and uncle hadn't been through enough of their private property being taken over, that they decided that they were going to take this hay that had blood in it and spread it across the property to drive on, and that for vehicles. If this was really about virus, how does this make sense? Another question for Canadians. The true virus here was Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and they were the virus. I can't see it any other way. That if they wanted proof of virus, then there would have been testing. And we didn't receive that. And if you want to leave a farmer's field like that, and you were really concerned about virus, then you would have cleaned it up properly, handled it way differently. And waterfowl are coming in and out all the time of that hay. We have pictures and videos of hundreds of ducks landing there. We did reach out to the ECCC, the Environmental Climate Change Canada, and also asked them for assistance, but kind of was met with a little bit of resistance, saying that this was not their jurisdiction. I'm really tired of hearing that word, that this is not our jurisdiction, when it has direct impact, or is supposed to, on waterfowl, water. And how was Canadian Food Inspection Agency allowed to create that carnage, create that aftermath, and walk away from it with no looking back?
Well, the fact that you're not apparently, and perhaps this might change in the next few days, but apparently not being allowed to clean up, to lift the quarantine.
Yeah.
I think perhaps Environment Canada might take a second look at this, given the fact that.
I really hope so, because this is something that they should be looking at. This is their jurisdiction. It is waterfowl and it is animals and waterways, and no agency, doesn't matter how much power you have, you should not be able to leave a farm or a family with that kind of mess, especially when claiming such viral threat. and saying that it was one of the most virulent threats of avian influenza known in Canada, but they walked away from it like that. So we also know how they had Super Save, which is not a credible and not certified to handle biohazardous waste. They've made a lot of mistakes here, and all we're doing is asking the right questions, looking for the appropriate answers to create a better change for Canadians in the future. And this is not about pointing fingers and saying, you're bad, you're wrong. It's about getting to the bottom of this and finding out the answers of why, how, and what do we do better?
What kind of response are you getting from media people you're talking to, or in general, people you're talking to today?
I think a lot of people are almost shocked. They need to read the tribunal once or twice or three times to understand what this means. I spoke to Jordan Keeley, MLA out of the Northern Peace, and he even was kind of like, wait, wait a minute. And, but I said to him, this really raises a huge question for his constituents. And that is, what other farmers were improperly served within his jurisdiction that it resulted in unlawful enforcement? So again, we just have to ask the right questions. Hopefully we get the right answers. Accountability is the word of this year, transparency, and a better way forward that's going to protect and preserve the future of our families and our food security and our agricultural farmers that are so hardworking and dedicated to generational food supply and nutritional food supply, because we all know that the name of the game is to get us into eating more lab-grown meat, have less nutritional food supply on the ground, that we are in control of even our seeds, even our, what we grow, what we spray on our food. So we have to look at this as a whole. And how do we bring in and implement a program or safeguards that are going to have more impact going forward, that will be upheld by the rule of law?
Well, I know you have been taking a careful examination of the story out of Toronto with the police corruption, and you posted it on your Facebook page, I think yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you find this rather coincidental or rather interesting that there would be after all that you've revealed about the activities and the attitude of the RCMP, who are not only doing the bidding of the CFIA, but actually ended up acting as hired farmhands, cleaning up their mess? These are cops.
Yeah.
And did you think, wow, it's like maybe this is not just an isolated incident. Maybe there is a problem here. There's an institutional problem with the police in Canada, and we need to have a closer look at who they're really working for. Are they working for you and I? Are they working for the public? Or are they in the pocket of governments and they're afraid to say no, even when they're given orders that are illegal? Because we know in the past, people who have been guilty of horrendous crimes have just said, I was just merely following orders. I was just doing what the government told me to do. And that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse, never is. But did you find it interesting that almost within 24 hours of you getting this good news, there was this huge scandal broke out of Toronto, and people are really noticing this?
I think it is impeccable timing. It is wonderful for Canadians to, I've been saying that I feel like the veil is being lifted slowly, and Canadians are really starting to see and get to witness where are we safe? What agencies and where are we really protected? Because like you say, the RCMP, was stood there. The night of November 6th and 7th, the RCMP stood there and witnessed on, in our opinion, it was a very illegal shooting. It was 251 meters to the highway, shooting almost towards the highway. There was no secure perimeter. There was no firearms safety officer that is, we have seen in the spendings that they had hired to oversee. We had shooters standing on top of 4 large square bales in that pen in the middle of the night in rain, shooting. And the RCMP stood there. It made not just Canadians scratch their heads, it made people across the world wonder if that could happen on our farm, then what exactly, what deeper corruption could be going on. They were used as security guards, glorified security guards, and that is very concerning, and it should be for Canadians. But I think the timing has been one of poetic, justice is what you could say. We had the first upheld tribunal violation for $10,000, which was absolutely false. They say we did not report a reportable disease. We absolutely did. It was in their call logs, in the tribunal records, them stating that we contacted not one vet, but two. And at the time, we thought it was Pseudomonas bacteria, which is non-reportable. And so we did not even assume or think of avian influenza, as it had never been a problem in ostrich in Canada. Then it moved into the spending of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Then they pleaded poverty by saying that they were going to cut 1,300 jobs. So somehow they found all this money to take away the livelihoods, secure a perimeter to kill animals, but yet they plead poverty and had to cut 1,300 jobs. And then this came out with RCMP, the 400. And now we're looking at a win with our tribunal this last Friday. So it's very much obviously been in the hearts and minds of Canadians and people across the world. And I just think it's our time. And there's no better time than now that we start to stand up, stay united, and demand accountability.
Well, I think when the CFIA upheld that $10,000 fine, you were so quick off the mark to get the evidence out there on social media. And I think within hours of that decision coming through, you had the evidence posted on your Facebook page about the fact you had reached out to veterinarians. It was Christmas time. No, they couldn't get there within a couple of hours, but you were notified them. There was no anonymous tip that set that's off. You were in communication with them. You proved it. You proved it immediately, and I think that's probably one of the reasons this tribunal came back so quickly in your favor.
I hope so.
You had the evidence out there. I wonder if have you talked to Jerry Ritz at all? Former Ag Minister.
No, I haven't. But you know what, David? I would love to know his opinion on this. I'd love to get a statement on this, because we're not just talking about. As he said, this is Heath McDonald's wheelhouse. So, where the heck is Heath McDonald in all of this? So yes, I would absolutely love to get a statement from him. This also comes at a very alarming time, right? When we just went through the Emergencies Act, got found unlawful and unreasonable to be used. And the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, another massive agency and a federal agency, given that, they claimed that the urgency and emergency of this held them from actually hand delivering a notice to us. Well, the tribunal found that to be absolutely false. The tribunal said you had been on the property multiple times, not once, not twice, and that there was time to assess this. There was no emergency that would justify the shortcuts the Canadian Food Inspection Agency made in delivering the notice. So once again, we're seeing another agency within the federal governing body claiming urgency and emergency and misusing that label. And we need to be really careful with that with Canadians and demand accountability with what does exactly urgency and emergency mean, and what does that mean to our rights when they claim that. We need to have more clarity on that and safeguards put into emergency and urgency.
Well, I think Winston Churchill once remarked about the war turning around in the Second World War. And he said this might not be the beginning of the end, but at least it's the end of the beginning. But I really think this has been a home run for you. And I really believe this might be the beginning of the end of this incredibly corrupt system that has been operating under the guise of Agriculture Canada. And I do believe that it's been your persistence and your courage that has brought them to this. And it's been 12 months in March since I started reporting on this story, and you first came on the show. And I don't think at any time I thought you would see such a rapid turnaround as you have in the last 48 hours. And this has been a tremendous victory, not just for yourself and your family or your farm, but I think for everybody in agriculture. And I think you can, Jerry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jerry Rich, you recently said Katie is our Joan of Arc. Well, I think you're leading a movement here that is viscerally changing the way things operate. And you can't argue with results. And I think that's what you certainly had in the last 48 hours.
Our farm is leading a movement. I've been blessed to be able to be the voice. It's something that has gotten me through the hardest days, is be able to be the voice for my family. Oh, look at me and the animals that I've grown up with, but nothing will replace the identity that they stripped from my mom. And so I will continue to fight for my family and for everybody else out there. And I think we have to remember, you can protect animal health while you respect the law. And we would be held accountable as we did, and we were arrested. I think we just ask the right questions now going forward as Canadians that are going to give us the best results. And those are hard questions, but we need to demand answers. And what punishment is there when they take these shortcuts that result in damage of livelihoods and animals that were never tested, and putting us in jeopardy for our food security going forward? And we need to ask those questions too. Again, I'm calling out to you as farmers. What other farmers have been improperly served that ended up in unlawful enforcement? So we just need to come together, ask the right questions, demand answers, and hope that this creates change for Canadians in the future.
Well, I know you're exhausted. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not surprised you're exhausted, and I'm sure you've done a lot of media spots today. And I'm beginning to see it start to pour out. The Sunday afternoon is probably one of the worst times to get a story out, but it's coming out big time now. People are noticing it. Yeah. And we're gonna keep fighting until this total justice is achieved. We cannot bring back the ostriches.
No.
And that's painful. I know, painful for you, for all of the people who stood by and watched that horrendous massacre occur. But we can still have some more justice for Universal Ostrich Farms, for Katie and Karen.
We sure can. And David, again, thank you for being on this journey with us. It's been a long one, but your voice and putting out all this material to make sure the Canadians know the truth and what is happening day to day, it has been instrumental and monumental in the fight for justice. So thank you. It's
been a pleasure. And I'm putting out a Substack tonight. I've got a couple of U.S. media tomorrow who are very interested, as usual, in the story. Americans are fascinated by the story, and they have been watching it. They just can't believe this actually happened. But I think there's going to be enough swell of enthusiasm when they read.
Me too. Yeah, Miracle Monday.
Miracle Monday. Yes, it's always a miracle.
And tomorrow's Miracle Tuesday. So more miracles, please. Yeah. All
right. Well, try to get some rest tonight, Katie. I know you're exhausted, and it's good news. I think it's easier to deal with exhaustion when it's good news than it's bad news. But it's amazing. I'll conclude with this. When I saw the email, and the subject heading was United Ostrich Farm win over CFIA, I thought, somebody is sending me. This is absolute. No, somebody is trying to get my goat. Somebody is sending me misinformation, because it's the first time there was a win, an absolute win in this. Yeah. And when I read through it, I said, wow, holy shit, that's fantastic.
And this gives hope to Canadians. We can prepare. We can start to fix some of this eroded trust. So we just need agencies and people that are willing to step forward and fight for what's right. So thanks, David.
Well, thank you, Katie. And we'll stay in touch and keep the faith, keep on moving.
Absolutely. And you too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
And that, of course, was Katie Pasitney, spokeswoman for Universal Ostrich Farms. And it's been a long journey, and it's not quite over, but as we said, this could be the beginning of the end. of a very corrupt system. And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen with a lot of determination, persistence, courage, fighting spirit, all of which Katie exhibits in full force. I want to show you a video here sent to me yesterday from Dacey Media, who has done a lot of work at the farm. He was there throughout a lot of the occupation. And he went back to the farm in the middle of winter here to document how bad things remain in January, February. So I haven't shown a lot of the stuff he's put out, but I'm remiss in not doing so because it's good material. Let's have a look at it.
Man. Oh shit, it's red tipped. What's that mean? Entrance to the kill pen. This is where the chute was. I believe one of the killing platforms would be in front of us, and one was in this area. Yeah, that's not a 22 long. That's something bigger.
Same round again, I think, right?
Yeah, still. Oh, yeah. Right there. In real time. What do we got? So it definitely seems like we found one of the shooting areas. You can see a red spray paint behind me on this pole. A little over here, there's blue spray paint. Still trying to figure out what that's about. Some of the birds were also painted red and blue. Not sure. But what I am finding is a consistent set of rounds. I got quite a few spent shell casings. Yeah, okay, so definitely two different types of rounds. Yeah. Right there. See it somewhere? Oh yeah, shit. Okay. Yeah, so that's a new round. Okay. Can't focus on it, but that's a 22 long, looks like. Oh yeah, and it's a rim fire. Yeah. Okay, so much smaller casing.
Where's that one?
Okay, there's a bunch here. Okay, I got 1, 2, 3. 3.
One over there.
Oh, yeah. 4, 5. Oh, yeah, still more. Yeah, they're everywhere around here. Holy cow, they're everywhere here. They're rimfire 22 longs. So very different from the first set I found. Right there.
So that's how that farm continues to look. And there's about 1,000 of those spent rounds scattered around the property. They were unable to really clean up, still under quarantine. But you just look at that mess. And I hope we see some more justice here. This is, I think, the beginning of a lot more. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of this story for the last 11 months. And we'll continue to do so. We've got some great stuff coming up. I interviewed a professor at the University of Ottawa yesterday on the war in Ukraine. Ivan Kachanovsky. You're going to find this fascinating, absolutely fascinating, what he talks about. He grew up in Ukraine, and the high school he attended, I found this absolutely incredible, was one of the high schools that was attacked by the Galicia Waffen-SS regiment that Yaroslav Hunka belonged to. Yaroslav Hunka, who you recall? Yeah, he was the Ukrainian Canadian who was invited to the House of Commons to sit in the gallery when Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was addressing a joint session of Parliament. And Hunka got 2 standing ovations because nobody had the smarts in the House to realize he was not fighting on our side in the Second World War. He was fighting with the Germans and with a Waffen-SS regiment. So Professor Kachanovsky went to the same high school that was apparently attacked by the Galicia regiment because there were Jewish people there. So incredible stories to tell, and we're going to keep doing this. And we'll let you know if there's any further updates from Universal Ostrich Farm. But I tell you, I think there's a lot more joy in Edgewood, BC at that farm, because finally validation, and finally they're vindicated for the courageous stand they took. And we're going to show you the merchandise, and I'll be back for some concluding remarks here.
Who cares?
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that show, and the merchandise is there. Like I said, this is Ostrich Day. Have a look at the ostrich merchandise. We've got some great trigger stickers, and we're going to continue to be promoting that merchandise. And I know a lot of you tuned in yesterday. Numbers weren't as high today, but share this broadcast with your friends. Let them know Katie was on here again for a great interview. And of course, I think that's probably about the 15th interview we've had with Katie since we started covering the story. And we're very happy to do so. So pass it on to your friends and family, because we're going to make sure people watch this. There's some incredible commentary there today. Thanks for watching, folks. I will be back again tomorrow, and it's Conspiracy Wednesday tomorrow. So we're going to be dealing with some of the things in the Berenstein files. You know what that's code for, right? I'm going to be very careful that we don't say anything remiss at the end of the show. But we're going to have a look at that. We're going to have a look at a dossier that was prepared by the FBI about Prime Minister Mark Carney. We'll look at that and see what's really there. And we're going to look at your comments tomorrow, your super chats, your Rumble rants. So please be here tomorrow, and I'll be here as well. Thanks for watching today. God bless you all. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.